Welcome to Telltale Books. I'm Greg,
I'm Emily.
and we're here to kick off our February reading with some February Valentine's appropriate videos
Well, I don't know
and
about
books.
appropriate.
No, it totally covers the subject. Because
It really does.
we're not reading Harlequin romances.
No.
Sorry,
To
Samantha.
Those who, to those who enjoy those.
But
No.
we're covering books that explore a wide variety of human relations.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly men and women,
Yeah.
but various romantic or sexual or just kind of,
We're reading
you know.
smut.
well, I mean, some of it,
Yeah, not all of it is actually very smutty.
some
when you
of it
think
is
about
not romantic and not really sexual. I mean, like Madame Bovary, I don't think that gets too racy. I haven't read it yet. I'm going to
Just
be
you
reading
wait.
that.
Just you
Okay.
wait. You can decide for
But
yourself
I mean,
how racy is too
it's
racy.
not really about a relationship. It's about a woman that, is trying to make and is off on, and ends up on her own out in society trying to survive. So that's a little different. So yeah, the whole month of February, that's what we decided to focus on, is a lot of books that, a lot of them get kind of racy. But a lot of them also are just explorations of human relationships.
And their complexities and intricacies and nuances
Mhm.
and taboos.
And so what got us thinking about this, really it's Samantha's fault,
We blame you.
because that's all she reads, it seems like. No, it really does come from her, because she got me reading the ACOTAR series, which is a high fantasy series, but at the same time, it gets pretty racy.
Yeah, it has an erotica tone to it.
And well, fantasy in my day wasn't like that. Matter of fact, are there any women in Lord of the Rings?
I mean, Eowyn
Okay.
and Arwen.
Oh yes,
And-
and the one woman, the white one.
Yeah,
I forget
Eowyn.
her- okay,
Eowyn.
that's her. Yeah, but totally non-sexual, I would say. in
Yeah,
that book.
there's no-
There's nothing even remotely romantic.
There's no hint
going
at
on.
it even.
And everything else is men fighting orcs, men fighting men. It's
Yeah, men fighting.
It's a men fest.
Men fighting. Men on horses, men fighting.
Men running.
Jumping, climbing.
Yes, swimming.
That sort of thing.
So, yeah, in my day that was fantasy,
Yeah.
and that's it. Well, it's a myth that, at least in the 1970s, it's a myth that it was primarily young men that were reading this stuff. There were really a lot of women that were fans by then, and a lot of women writers. I mean, Ursula Le Guin started writing in, I think, 1962.
Yeah.
So she had been going for a long time and had already been winning awards before I ever started reading. So, maybe in the 1930s, but in the 1970s, it was changing big time. And even in the 1950s, when Tolkien released his, it was changing already.
Yeah. We're having
So-
that sexual revolution rev up.
Yeah. But still, the fantasy stories, I mean, Lord Foul's Bane, Sword of Shannara, I don't think there was a whole lot of women in it. And if there were, there wasn't much of anything romantic going on. And that was fantasy in, like, 1978.
Yeah.
So, reading ACOTAR and seeing just how far it goes, that was shocking to me.
It's quite pornographic.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't shocking to read about that
Yeah.
stuff, but it was shocking to see how things had changed. Because there were a lot of years in between there. I wasn't doing any reading, I wasn't keeping up with all this stuff. So it got me thinking about looking into this, and got me thinking about the history of this type of book. Because you go way, way back. I mean, eroticism goes back to the Greeks.
Mm-hmm.
And Ovid's Metamorphosis.
Even their gods' myths.
Yeah, even some of
Everything,
the stories
yeah.
from the Bible, like
Mhm.
Salome.
Yeah, yeah.
And you had some sex going on and some racy stuff going on, even though it didn't get too descriptive like today.
Mm-hmm.
But by the 1700s, when the novel first was invented, the late 1700s or mid 1700s,
Mm-hmm.
right away you had smut.
Yeah.
You had pornography getting written.
Yep.
And it wasn't long before you had the Marquis de Sade
Mm-hmm.
and Fanny Hill and stuff like that being published,
Mm-hmm.
but being published under the table and sold
Low
under the
key.
table.
Yes.
And these books were written by men. They were written for men.
Mm-hmm.
They were sold to men. They were sold under the counter so that they wouldn't get arrested.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they got caught and they got busted.
Yeah.
And a lot of these
Yeah,
books
Desaad got
burned.
arrested like a bunch of times.
Yes.
He was a pervert.
Mm-hmm.
They all knew it.
So these people were writing this stuff, but they had to keep it under wraps. But it was very male focused.
Yeah.
There were no women writing this stuff. There were no women reading this stuff. Women back then wouldn't be caught dead with something like
Yeah.
this.
In fact, it was considered impolite in polite society to be a woman who read novels.
Right.
It was extremely taboo at the time.
Mm-hmm. So that's a situation that existed kind of throughout the late 1700s, throughout the 1800s. The Victorians had a lot of that, where they had a lot of anonymous books. Anonymous became the biggest selling author of all time.
Of course they did.
But it was all sold again under the table to men and written for men, by men. And you saw another resurgence of things. Well, in between, kind of after World War One, you had books like Lady Chatterley's Lover and the books of Anais Nin and Henry Miller that kind of challenged the laws of the day, the obscenity laws, because they wrote actual literature, but they put a lot of very, very racy descriptions into their books, so that people reading it, they termed it obscene, and they could not publish. I skipped over a big one, Oscar Wilde.
Oh yes, Oscar Wilde was the naughty boy of his century.
1890s, he did Salome, and that got him in lots of trouble. He actually, it was a play, he couldn't produce it in England, not because of the racy subject, but because of the biblical subject.
It's from the Bible.
There was a law in England that you could not produce a play on a biblical subject.
So he did.
Yeah.
Because that is just par for the course.
He didn't just choose
He chose
Christ
one of-
in the manger.
Yeah. No, he chose one of the more violent ones.
He chose a story about a woman that demands a person's head because he won't have sex.
It's John
with
the
her.
Baptist.
Yeah.
She demands John the Baptist's head. It's that story.
And so he had to go to France. He wrote it in French for Sarah Bernhardt, one of the greatest actresses of the time. And, it was a while before it was finally brought into England because of the laws.
Yeah.
And a lot of obscenity laws continue to exist. In the 1950s, you started to see some pornography appearing, mainly because of Playboy. And Hugh Hefner challenged the laws. And, his stuff was very much softcore, but it still was stepping over the line. And so he got thrown in prison.
Yep.
And he challenged it and lawyered up, and he won, got out of it, and kept
Next thing you
continuing
know-
to produce Playboy. And so right after that, you had a lot of novels come out. And interestingly, science fiction writers like Harlan Ellison and Robert Silverberg, they paid their bills by writing erotica for one of the smut paperback.
A lot of illustrators did too. Like,
Oh yeah.
Dr. Seuss did a lot for Playboy.
Yeah.
Articles as well as political illustrations and things, because they didn't want just smut. They wanted it to be literature too. So there's a lot of like really great authors who started in Playboy. Mm-hmm. So I think that's awesome.
But here again,
Oldest profession. Oh.
it was very male focused.
Yeah.
All the paperback books, and there were thousands of paperback. I mean, Robert Silverberg was producing 5 of these books a month.
Oh my goodness.
For like 10
Did
years.
he even edit? Did he do
I don't
research?
know, but along the way he was also writing all his science fiction. How did the man find time?
He's writing 30 pages each day in each book.
Well, I'm thinking
That's
he
his whole
probably
day.
had like a novel that the first one he wrote,
Yeah.
and then for the second one he took the first one, changed a few things, took that, changed a few more things for
cranking
the
them
third
out.
one, and basically did the same thing over and I don't know. I haven't read all these, but
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's probably
Just
how
machining
he
them
was able
out.
to
We're just going
be
to
that
crank them
productive.
out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And of course, in the 1950s, you also had Lolita get published eventually. There again, that got him in trouble, and finally it was published by Grove Press or Olympia. And that caused a big deal.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because that, to this day, people can't believe Lolita and the subject that it deals with of an old guy going after a 12-year-old girl.
Yeah. It's pretty risque. And it's
Yeah.
also very illegal.
And it's
In
also,
this country, at least.
And it's also written kind of from the main character's viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's written kind of comedically.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this thing that's making you laugh, and you're getting the viewpoint of somebody who thinks that there's nothing wrong with what he's doing. And that just makes a lot of people just get totally
Very
creeped out.
uncomfortable. Yeah, that makes everyone a little uncomfortable. Not comfy.
So yeah, Stanley Kubrick was a genius to cast Peter Sellers and what's his name? He was in North by Northwest also.
Oh. Where's my husband when you need him?
And he was in Journey to the Center of the Earth. And the name just isn't going to come to me tonight.
Anyway.
He's one of my favorite actors.
Oh, darn.
Anyway.
We have all this erotic literature in our brains now. We just gotta, we've let go of some things, I guess.
Well, and talking about this, I'm looking at a stack of books that says Philip K. Dick, Philip K. Dick, Philip K. Dick,
I know,
Philip K.
there's a
Dick,
lot
Philip-
of dick happening over there. There is a lot of dick.
It's distracting.
Oh, very distracting.
Anyway.
I feel that. But yeah.
So here you go into the 1960s. There's all this erotica being created, but it's very male focused. But what you have happening in this country is this movement towards people wanting to come out from hiding and start talking about this stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about sexuality
And
a little more.
in particular, you had doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists start doing studies. What's the big one?
Freud?
They did Freud wrote one, but in the 1950s, Masters
Oh.
did that big study. Masters and I forget the other person. They did that big study that resulted in that book, and that book became a bestseller. And it was a scientifically researched book about human sexuality and in all of its forms, and it was very frank and very open, and they realized that there were all these varieties out there and all this stuff.
There's a lot of
going on.
flavors of things.
And so your typical Catholic Church, straight up, only in
Heterosexual
marriage,
couple. Yeah, only in
heterosexual,
marriage.
missionary style
Planning,
sexuality,
family planning.
that was,
Barefoot and pregnant.
there were people that did practice that, but they were the minorities.
Yes.
That there was a lot more other things going on. And then you had women wanting to come out of the kitchen. And along with that, I mean, a big thing we forget today is that before the late 1960s, women were not supposed to enjoy sex. So, but they did.
Yes.
At least certain
In
percentage
fact,
of
that
it
is
did.
why red light districts were so popular. It was an easy way to make money, and you could have fun doing it.
Yeah. Well, most women didn't do that, but they still they wanted to be more open about it, and they wanted to be more equal, a more equal partnership in that relationship.
Yes.
And so they started, the women's movement was about a lot more than just equal wages. They were looking to break down all the barriers that were
Yes.
keeping women subordinate and in the dark.
Yeah, and just
about things.
a lot of it too was just pointing out in history why women had to fight so hard just to get the right to vote, just to get the right to have any kind of political stance, to even own their own property when their husbands were alive,
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff, to have their own businesses and all these other things that seem so taboo. Like they just wanted what any other person could get.
Yeah. So the 1960s was about more than just equal rights in the workplace. It was also all about sexual equality and sexual liberation. And a lot of that happened going into the 1970s. And of course, that resulted in disco, which we stood back and said, wait a minute, something's wrong here.
Saturday Night Fever.
And so we pulled back a little bit. But, it resulted in literature shifting a lot. All of a sudden you had romance novels being written. And I, for one, for many years thought these things were just innocent romance novels like you saw in the movies.
Not even the Amish ones.
There was
They're
a lot
racy.
They were a lot racier.
Yep.
I only found that out talking to Samantha, that Harlequin romances were not so prim and proper as I
No,
always
absolutely
thought.
not. Everybody banging. All of them. Lots of nudity.
But you never had that outside of that. It was just the Harlequin romances. Men didn't read that. None of us really had a clue.
It didn't bleed into other genres very frequently.
But we did have other authors like Philip Roth and books like The Thornbirds was written. That's
Larry
pretty
Niven
racy.
had some of it in his Ringworld series. He had a little bit more intimacy involved.
Yeah, science fiction writers in the late 1960s and 1970s, there were certain writers that
Started
wanted to become more open
Leading
about
in,
sexuality. But that still was very, very much the exception. So writers like Tiptree, Le Guin, with,
Le Guin.
I believe it's The Dispossessed, with the people that can switch sex.
And then there's the what was the other one I read? The Four Winds of Forgiveness or something. It's a series of novellas.
Is that Le Guin?
Yeah, that's Le Guin.
Okay, it's got to be later.
Yeah.
But
It's one of her primarily erotic
okay.
fictions that I've read.
But you had, in the early 70s, you had David Gerald writing The Man Who Folded Himself, which kind of gets into homosexuality a bit.
Oh, I thought it was about sitting on himself.
No, not exactly. There's some time paradoxes involved.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
And then there's Joanna Russ, the female man, she was a militant feminist. She was really pushing for it. I believe she's still alive, but I don't think she's writing much anymore.
Okay.
And because I never hear of her anymore, but she was big at pushing the feminism and pushing for sexual freedom in the 1970s and writing.
She was a
about
big civil
taboo
rights
topics.
activist too.
Okay.
In all, if I remember right. I
Yeah.
can't remember.
So that started entering science fiction, and women started coming into the genre. And gradually, you led towards a time where now, in the genre and outside the genre, there is a large amount of erotic material being published. But I'd say 95% of it is slanted towards women. A lot of it is very blatantly erotic novels. And it's being sold right in Barnes & Noble.
Yeah. Right next to
It's no longer
the
under
Bible.
the counter. It's no longer behind the cash register. It's right out there.
Yeah.
And people are buying it
In its
and
own
liking it
section.
and talking about it. And there are whole booktube channels that are just dealing with smutty novels. And of course, a lot of it enters into science fiction, fantasy, horror. There's a lot of eroticism, a lot of what we would call pornographic scenes right in these, though the novel itself has a more traditional fantasy, there's battles and there's evil people, and
it still has its theme.
It's still
It's
like
plot.
Lord of the Rings, but now you have women, and women are doing
There's
it.
so much plot. Look at all that plot happening in that bedroom. So much plot there.
So there's been a huge shift. First of all, like I say, bringing it out into the open, and at the same time selling it towards women, to women.
Normalize it. Yeah.
And I think it's a good thing. It's kind of lamentable that it's aimed mostly at women, though I do realize most of the readers today are women.
Yeah, most purchasers in
that's
general
more of a-
are women.
That's more of a marketing thing, is if you're going to write a book slanted towards women, because that's
Yeah.
the majority of who's looking at books right now.
Purchasing in general. Women
Yeah.
tend to be the primary purchasers of their household.
But it is good to see a lot of books coming out. Now, it would be nice to see books being written better. Kind of like what Henry Miller and D.H. Lawrence did with their books. And, well, Philip Roth. Some of the others that wrote stuff like that.
There's a little more plot and complexity to the story
and
than
it would be
it's
nice
just
to see more like
people
Le
fucking.
Guin or Joanna Russ instead of, just
other societal concepts that
Yeah.
factor into the
And-
relationship.
and pushing the level of quality literature higher in the stuff that's being written.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at today, and we've changed a lot from 1700s when it was just for men and it was under the table and 100% illegal, to where now it's in the stores.
Yeah. Women
It's
can
totally
buy.
out in the open.
In fact,
and
it's marketed to them.
Marketed towards women instead of men.
Yep.
You almost want to believe that it's women that caused it to become more open and acceptable.
I honestly think it was. I think it was the entirety of the civil rights movement when we started talking about people having equal rights and talking about people being able to embrace things that we once thought were taboo and different. And I think that kind of played into it a lot, where it wasn't just the sexual liberation, but it's just like, what if we aren't what you say we are? And you want, what if we are all just people who all have our own preferences, our own stuff, and, you can't just keep making blanket statements about people anymore. That, all the black people are bad, all the women hate sex and don't deserve everything that everyone else, all the white men have, kind of thing. So I think that did kind of push it in that direction where people are like, yeah, now that it's being challenged, let's write about it.
Yeah.
Let's try and reinforce this. And I think that's kind of how it did start.
Yeah. And, that's where it's at for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people don't like this trend and would like to see us go back to where it was illegal and under the table.
Yeah.
But
Just avoid those books then. Let them
Yeah.
exist. Look away.
for what it's worth, we have changed, and it is out in the open, and it is out there.
And it should be normalized. I think a lot of people have sexual relationships, and I think it needs to be normalized, because why not?
Yeah.
If everybody has, well, not everybody, maybe some asexuals don't have sexual relationships, but the opportunity is there. So,
Yeah.
the options, people should know. People should know. I think knowledge is power. And that's how I think you have a healthy dialogue, too,
Yeah.
about what relationships, sexuality, eroticism in general is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, what you don't know can hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a fun subject. So what have we been reading for this one? Let's talk about, quickly just name some names of some of the books we intend to do in this series.
Oh, well, we're leading off with Lady Chatterley's Lover,
Yes.
We have a book by Anais Nin called Little Birds.
Little
it's a
Birds.
short story collection.
Very nice.
A more contemporary author, Alina Reyes, I did a video on her Satisfaction.
Okay.
She's a Spanish author, and so it's in translation, and she's pretty well respected for how literate her works are.
Nice.
And but it is, what everything she's written is very racy and very out there, and she doesn't hold back. Another one, some classics we're doing, of course, Lolita, Salome by Oscar Wilde,
Yes.
and Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert.
I can't wait for you to read that one. It's interesting.
Okay.
I like
And we're
that one.
going way, way, way back with Lysistrata by Aristophanes, another play. And am I forgetting it? Oh, and Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister.
Yep, I'm going to throw Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister in there because it does have those themes.
And I'm forgetting a couple. I know I'm forgetting a couple.
You'll just be surprised when you see the videos drop then.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, that kind of gives a good overview, I think, of the
Yeah.
kind of stuff that... So we're doing a variety. Some more contemporary, some not as contemporary, but
We're going all the
full
way back to ancient
spectrum.
Greece.
Yeah, full spectrum.
And after February, we will be dropping some others. I've got a long list of books I want to read that fit into this topic. We'll be doing some others in the future after February, and so watch out for them.
Yes. We just figured that with Valentine's Day coming up, it's a great way to kick this off. So.
Yeah, and be warned, some of them are going to be frank discussions. These are not for kids.
Yep.
Some of these books are definitely not for kids.
Yes, sex, drugs,
They're
and rock and
definitely
roll.
not for anybody who's sensitive about the subject. So be warned that a lot of our videos for the next month are not going to be for everybody. There's going to be content issues. And we don't believe in censorship, and so we're not holding back.
So get ready to have a sex talk, guys. We're going to have the talk.
Yeah.
When a man and a woman, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman are in love, super drunk, or on some drugs, or just really horny and want no strings attached, or all the circumstances, very much sex.
So I hope you'll tune in for February. It's going to be quite a month. Very
It
different from
is.
what we've done. A lot more exciting, I think. And it ought to be interesting.
Yes. I mean, we're going to have, like, sex talks. Like, how much more interesting can that get?
Yeah.
Yes. So, and we do ask that, yeah,
No
we're probably...
illustrations.
Yeah, no illustrations, unfortunately. No diagrams. I mean, I could bring a book of Kama Sutra for reference if we ever needed one. We've got
No.
those. Now, this is the position they were referring to in chapter 3, page blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
That kind of stuff. But yeah, we're pretty excited about it, though. So, yeah. Anything else?
That's all I got to say.
All right. Well, welcome to our erotic topic, and we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
See you in the next
See ya.
video.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.